I'm Tamara, the girl behind Starcross Knits. This is another knitting podcast episode where I share my recently finished objects, what am I currently working on, and like new fiber or yarn acquisitions, etc., miscellaneous updates. So I'll start by showing what I'm wearing right now. This is a top that I talked more about in depth in my last knitting podcast episode. It's knit in one strand of Knitting for Olive pure silk yarn on US 2 needles, I believe. And this is my own design and has a little lace edge. So I actually just finished writing up the pattern for this one, and I have a call for testers out right now, which I think by the time I post this video, it might still be open. So if it is, I'll link it below. Otherwise, it is already closed and underway, and I'm hoping to have testers finish with this top around early mid-December, and then hopefully launch around then. I've already gotten quite a bit of wear out of this one because it's very lightweight. This is my first completely fingering weight design that I've done, and it has a tiny smidge of positive ease at like the waist, the upper arms, the hips, and that combined with the vertical bust darts, I feel like just kind of skims over everything and makes it extremely comfortable to wear while still being, I don't know, a little bit sexy in like a kind of 2000s-ish sort of way. So I'm really loving designs that feel like they're both extremely comfortable, like kind of a second skin, and then also are still kind of like fitted and romantic and feminine and girly and maybe a little bit sexy. I still haven't thought of a name for it yet. I was thinking maybe Violette blouse or top, because the lace up close kind of looks like butterflies, but I couldn't think of a cute name that involved butterflies. But I was thinking about flowers, and I feel like violets look like the shape of the petals looks a lot like the wings of a butterfly and looks a lot like the repeat in this lace. You can see it's kind of butterfly-ish. So yeah, that was my thought. I also got the suggestion of Philia, which I thought was really pretty too, and Juliet. And yeah, all just very kind of like old-fashioned feminine names. So, but yeah, that's this one. And again, if you want to see more info about it, check out my last podcast episode. Now I will show off my more recently finished objects. So this first top is one that I brought out on the podcast like 4 or 5 months ago. I finally finished this. This is actually the longest I've ever had any work in progress on my needles that I actually intended to come back to and finally did finish. So I think I first cast this tank on in probably exactly about a year ago, probably November 2022. And I've like been excited about the design the whole time, but there were just some reasons that made me really procrastinate on revisiting it. So I'll tell you a little bit more about this one. The inspiration for it was this plaid dress that I got from Beckenbridge that I still really love. It has kind of like a flat panel across the bust with a ribbon on the inside and the outside, and you tie that together and it cinches the neck down into like a cinched V shape. And I just got that dress last fall, maybe like last October, and loved the silhouette so much that I felt like it would make a really cute knitted top. And the reason, so I chose to knit this one, the bust is actually knit flat, and it's knit this direction, like you cast on here at the back, and then knit with increases up to the bust, knit across, and then seam it together afterwards. And then you pick up stitches and knit the rest of the bottom top down in the round with some, a little bit of hip shaping. I don't know if you can really see that. A little bit of hip shaping, and then a little bit of a curved front hem. It's kind of subtle on this one. And then a folded hem at the bottom. So the reason that I decided to knit the bust flat and the body in the round was I actually just made some swatches of the fabric, and I just kind of practiced pinching them, like folding them closed. And I just thought that the way that the fabric folded when you were doing it widthwise instead of height-wise just looked prettier to me. I think it just makes like a more natural fold. And kind of an unexpected benefit of it, in my opinion, is it actually adds a little bit of volume to the bust. Like you can sort of see from the side that when you pick up stitches from the like the row edge of something, it makes the stitches that you're picking up sit a little bit further back. You can see it on this sleeve too. Like the sleeve sits a little bit farther back as opposed to the row that you're picking it up from. So I like this because I have a small bust, and I feel like this creates a little bit of an illusion that my bust has a little bit more volume than it actually does. So that's another reason that I like it. And then the other reason that I wanted to make the bust and the body in separate pieces was I really wanted there to be a seam there just below the bust, because I thought that if you're just, like, this is just lacing a ribbon through, so you can see it just goes around the back too. And I figured if you're just lacing a ribbon through and you don't have a seam, that would put a lot of stress on like the individual stitch that's holding that shut, and I didn't want that stitch to like have too much force on it when you're wearing it like that and then have it stretch out and like screw up the tension around that area. So that's why I wanted a seam to sort of like stabilize things so that it's like a little more sturdy. You can also wear it without the ribbon tied in the bow in the front, and I think it looks really cute like that too. I wasn't necessarily intending for it to be worn like both ways, but I do really like having designs that feel a little bit adjustable. Like my Thine Own top, you can wear the straps a bunch of different ways with ribbons. So I really like that this is like a little bit convertible in that sense too. So I actually really, really love this design. I didn't tell you yet why I procrastinated on it for literally a year, and that's because of the yarn that I used. So this is using 3 strands of Knit Picks Luminance, which is a lace weight 100% mulberry silk yarn. So it's very, very slippery. I had a really hard time winding this yarn up into balls. Basically, like when you're winding up a ball, you're using a lot of the tension and friction of the ball itself to like stick the yarn to it as you're moving around. But with this yarn, since it's so slippery, it will slip below the ball on the ball winder and actually land like beneath the ball that you're making. And then when you take it off of the ball winder and like, you know, the center collapses for a center pull ball, those tangles kind of have nothing to keep them in place. They collapse onto each other, and then it just creates like the most tangled nightmare of a mess to deal with. Unfortunately, I think I wound up all of my skeins of this before I really was paying attention and understood that that was what was happening. So all of my yarn was like screwed up in this way. So that was a really stressful thing to deal with, and it made me just kind of avoid working on this because I felt like it was such a headache to manage the yarn that I had. That was one element. I knit the body of this too tight the first time. The bust section is perfect, but I just picked up way too few stitches for the body. The reason for that is at the time that I was making this a year ago, I feel like I had way fewer grading skills than I have now. And I think I just picked up like what seemed like a relatively reasonable ratio of stitches to rows, and I really didn't think about it much more than that, which is like crazy that I did that. So I ended up frogging the entire body of it after a couple of months because it was just too tight, and I procrastinated on frogging it because the yarn was a nightmare, but it actually wasn't too bad to frog. And then I redid the body. I was happy with it. I did a cast off. I did an I-cord, way too tight. I don't know what I was thinking. I-cord cast offs are not stretchy at all. Silk yarn is not stretchy. It has, I think, like decent strength to it. Like it's not gonna stretch hugely out of shape the same way that like alpaca might, for instance, but it doesn't have like elasticity to really pull it back in like wool does. And just like the amount of stretch that it has is not the same as wool. So it was really uncomfortably tight. So I had to redo the I-cord cast off. And I also was procrastinating on that because every time I would frog this, the yarn is so slippery. I used metal needles. I would be worried about losing some stitches, and I had 3 strands held together. And so it meant that like that's 3 times the number of little loops to fall off of your needle as you're frogging stuff. That just felt chaotic. Then I did a folded hem because I thought, okay, the I-cord was too tight. But I don't want this to roll. Why don't I try a folded hem? The way that I first did the folded hem was knitting it, and then I like to purl 1 row on the edge of my folded hems because it helps give kind of like a sharper edge to turn on. So I did that, and then on the final, after you are ready to fold it, I actually picked up stitches and I cast off the folded hem with stitches from farther up. So I was like casting off in the same row that I was completing the folded hem, and I cast off too tight. So again, that was just silly. I just did a regular cast off, and I don't really know why I did that. Like, what was I thinking? Because it would obviously be too tight. And then I also find for me that when I'm casting off on the same row that I'm doing the folded hem, it tends to flip more for me, because I guess there's like, you know, another row of knitting that I feel like it just kind of bends the fabric a little bit when you're doing the cast off in the same row that you've like picked up the stitches to fold the hem. So I redid it. I cast off it very, very loosely, and then I seamed the folded hem down with like a whip stitch afterwards. The reason I used a whip stitch, honestly, I don't know very much about sewing, but I figured if I'm looping a lot of yarn as I'm doing that seam, then that gives more length of yarn to stretch as I need to stretch to put it on. The whip stitch has like, if you think of it like a coil, it has like more length to give. So that worked great. The hem is now done. I'm really happy with it. I also had some other like hiccups in trying to finish this. I at one point added an I-cord edge all along the back and the like neckline and back edge of this. And that was a problem because again, I-cord is not very stretchy. This was like an applied I-cord edge that you add after the fact. I-cord is not very stretchy, and I found that it looked really nice when I was wearing it without it cinched because it kind of like straightened up all of those edges rather than having them curl inwards a little bit. But the problem was that since it's not very stretchy, it meant that I didn't have quite enough stretch to wear it cinched, because the I-cord, if it was kind of tight across this like front chest width, it wouldn't have the stretch to really stretch down for like a deeper V cinch like I wanted. So that was a problem. So I just took the I-cord edge off, and I think I'm happy with it without any edge, to be honest, because the way that it curls is curling inwards, because this is knitted flat. So it's like curling inwards at the, like the row edge. I don't know what else to call it. And so I actually think that looks pretty, and it looks totally fine, and it makes it very, very comfortable to wear. So I am really happy with the comfort of this. I think if I were to do this again, I might still use this yarn, because honestly, this yarn just feels so good. It feels like buttery soft. It's so luxurious and comfortable to wear. There are some things that I don't love about this mulberry yarn. I feel like it does start to pill. I mean, ignore my deodorant stains that I got on it from wearing it, but it does start to pill more easily than I expected. And honestly, that's a problem that I've had with almost all Knit Picks yarn that I've used. I find that it is very soft, but with that you get quite a bit of pilling, which can be really frustrating because it's a little bit harder to take care of your garments, and it makes me worry how well they'll hold up to a lot of wear, which I try to knit things that I really want to wear. So I wear all of my knits pretty often. So yeah, that's a downside for it, as opposed to like this knitting for olive silk yarn. This is a raw silk or barrette silk and not mulberry silk, so it's not quite as silky looking. It's like a matte texture, but I feel like this will hold up in terms of pilling probably a little bit better, or it just won't be as noticeable because it's already a slightly like matted slubby texture to begin with. This bust piece in particular, I feel like is looking a bit fuzzier and like more worn, probably because I mean, it's a year old at this point. I haven't worn it, but I've like thrown it into a lot of project bags and moved it around and frogged it and like manipulated it a lot. So those are some downsides to it. If I did use this yarn again, I think, honestly, I think I would ball the yarn up by hand. Actually, a potential solution I had, I don't have it with me, I'll show a photo of it. I mean, it's like extremely unaesthetic, but I cut off a piece of a paper towel roll and actually put that over the center of my ball winder and like just taped it in at the top. And then I wound the silk yarn up like on top of that paper towel roll rather than having it sit directly on the ball winder itself. The reason that I tried this out was that I thought a big part of this tangle issue is that when the yarn falls below the ball that it's making and it's just wrapping around the ball winder itself, and then you take the ball out, everything collapses and then it gets super tangled. But I figured if I keep this sort of like center paper towel roll, when I take it off of the ball winder, it still has like a core because it was wrapped around the paper towel roll itself. And that means that it won't collapse in on itself at the bottom when you have those like slippages. Slippages? I don't know, that sounds really weird. When the yarn slips down. So I feel like that will help like stabilize it and cause fewer tangles. Preliminary results seem promising, but I haven't knit through an entire skein that was wound this way, so I can't like fully endorse that strategy. So yeah, in terms of next steps for this top. So I had originally been thinking of making this as like a made to measure pattern. I think it has a couple of like nuances to it. So like I said, the bust is knit flat. So you knit and then you do increases and then you knit the length of your front chest width and then you do some decreases. I feel like you would normally see some bust shaping too in terms of like going from your full bust to your under bust. My version does not have that because I don't have a huge difference between my bust and my under bust. And I figured I kind of liked a little bit of that extra fabric because it adds to this ruching and it adds like a little more volume. And then your underbust, you're just picking up the stitches for your underbust or your waist anyway. So you are getting that cinch in just below the bust section. I worry that for someone with a very large bust, the difference between your full bust to your underbust will be much larger of a difference. And I worry that like they might need basically like what would have been some increases along the edges. I thought about maybe trying to do that in short row shaping, like adding little wedges of length to this bust section so that it's as if you had a little like wedge of increases or decreases at the underarm. I'm not sure. I haven't like prototyped that or figured out how it would work. So the good news is that like you would, in terms of testing, you would find out pretty quickly if it will work or not with the bust that you have, because you'd like find out within the first inch of once you've picked up and knit down. So I don't know. I might move forward with that as like another made to measure pattern. I don't think that I can do this as a graded pattern, which I like the idea of being able to do, but the reason that I don't feel confident doing things like this as a graded pattern is that I don't know, and I don't know that there's a way to find out because I don't think that this is like universal for people of the same size even, what this distance is. Like this vertical distance from like, you know, imagine where the top of your bra starts to the bottom band of your bra. I don't know that length. It's not on size charts. I think it varies a lot from person to person, both based off of your cup size and then also like how your bust sits on your body. I don't know that. So I don't think that I could possibly do a graded pattern because I don't know what that length should be for different people. And you're knitting it again lengthwise, so you have to like commit to what that width will be kind of. So yeah, I don't know. So it would probably be made to measure. That was actually something that I ran into issues with when I was trying to grade up my Sweet Nothings cami. I kind of just put that one aside even though people were interested in it, and I feel bad about that. I also had some like gauge issues with the superwash yarn that I used, but I felt a little bit stressed because again, that one has like an underbust ribbon and like things changed there. And I was trying to grade it, but I can't figure out, I don't know what that length should be for different people. So I think that that one probably I would need to do sort of a combination of graded / made to measure, or at least like try it on as you go to make sure that this is gonna work right for you. It really bothers me. Like, I don't know if I'm just kind of picky about fit things, but I wouldn't feel good if I released a graded design that is meant to hit right at the underbust, and then some people have it hitting partway through their bust because their bust is larger, or some people have it hitting too low. Like, I don't know. I'm like, I want it to look right on everyone, and that can be kind of hard to do in a graded pattern when some people are not confident, like going off their own path and modifying things. Some people don't try things on as they go, and it's just, I don't know. Yeah, so that's the deal with this one. So I'm gonna sit on this one for a little bit, but I do like the idea of still moving forward with the pattern for it eventually, and it would probably be made to measure. So yeah, I don't know. I guess let me know if you have any thoughts about this one. The reason that I finally decided to pick this one up and finish it is I'm working on like a chocolate brown cardigan right now that I was hoping to wear at Rhinebeck, and I thought that this tank might be really pretty to go underneath it because the brown and blue I think look really nice together, and I want to give myself options. My next finished object, this is actually a machine knit tank, and this is just another version of a tank that I've already made a couple versions of before. I have like a video sort of vlogging the process of making one of them. This is a little tank top, and it's knit in 100% mercerized cotton yarn, which comes out feeling very drapey, silky, smooth. I made this on my standard gauge brother knitting machine that a friend left to me when she was moving, and this was just like one of the cones of yarn that came from her with the machine. I think it's Tam Pearl, P-E-R-L-E. So this one is just knit with, this one was knit flat and then seamed along the edges, and then I do a little picot edge. And this one I decided to do, it's a little bit hard to see because the contrast is low. I feel like a beauty blogger. Okay, there you can kind of see. So this one is like a baby pink, and then there's like a white trim, and I just did a color change right where I was doing a folded picot edge. I also feel like, I've been thinking about making another of my Thine Own made to measure top, and I feel like that would be really pretty detail to do on that too, because you can totally do it with hand knitting. Just like change the color in the couple rows on either edge of your picot folded hem that you're doing, I think would be so cute. And I actually chose this color based off of an Instagram poll that I made. I had people choose between this kind of like baby pink and a more like ballet blush pink. And then I also had people choose if I should do pink with white edges or white with pink edges. And I think it came out really cute. Sorry, it's a little bit, I did block it, but I also threw it in the dryer a tiny bit because it did stretch out just a little bit. That's a nice thing about working with cotton yarn though, is that this is totally machine washable. And another technique that I feel like I got better at for this one was learning more seaming techniques. So I hand seamed the other two versions of this top that I made, and that took like the vast majority of the time it took to make the top. I timed it in my vlog that I made. I think the whole top was something like 5.5 hours, and I think like 4 hours of that was all just hand seaming. So I still had to seam, like hand seam these folded picot hems. Honestly, I should figure out a more efficient way to do that. I'm sure there is one. But I also, instead of using waste yarn cast-offs, I used a little linker machine, which like manually casts off. It's very error prone, like it's very, very fussy. So that's the downside. But when it works well and it works quickly when it works. Like that's the worst part about machine knitting, is when something doesn't work. With stitches this tiny, it's like chaos, and it's so frustrating getting them back on the needle. But that was faster. And then also for seaming these edges, I think these seams look a lot better than on my first couple versions that I made in terms of like straightness. And that's because I put these back on the knitting machine needles, like with the two pieces with the wrong sides or the right sides facing each other. And then I manually like use the little hooks, like the needles on the machine to do a latch cast off, I think is what it's called. And that was a lot faster. So that's great. This took me way less time, and I'm pretty happy with it. I really, really, really do like that picot border edge. So I was thinking about also making a white one with a black edge. I just think that would look really cute, giving like a tiny bit of French maid perhaps. But I feel like that makes me think of like, I don't know, maybe like Musée Paris. I feel like I've seen some really cute sort of girly black and white things lately, which actually, even in my last podcast episode, I was wearing a black Thine Own top with a white ribbon. I don't know, I just think that's a really cute combo right now. So yeah, so that's the status of this one. I'm considering maybe putting this one up for sale on my Instagram because I really wanted to like learn more techniques and keep working on the machine. But I feel like I don't wear baby pink that often, but I'm glad I made it because I had the yarn, I learned more skills with it, and it is really soft, comfy, and I think it's just a cute silhouette with a cute color. Okay, now let's talk about works in progress. Sorry, the lighting changed. My camera was overheating, so I took like a 15-minute break, but now it is suddenly overcast. Let's move into works in progress. So I showed you this, my very first sock in the last podcast episode. I've now knit almost the second sock. So for this one, I use a forethought heel where you knit across the heel stitches. with a different yarn, like a waist yarn, and then you pick those out later and then add the heel in. This is called a peasant heel afterwards with decreases on either side. And I did that because I didn't want to disrupt the gradient pattern. With this one, I decided to do an afterthought heel, which is pretty much the same idea, except you don't knit that one half section of waist yarn. You just go through and pick up stitches afterwards. I don't love having to pick up stitches across a long row. To be honest, I feel like I start to like get confused about which row that I'm on. Historically, especially because these are kind of small stitches, but I was just too lazy to find waist yarn, so I'm trying it both ways, forethought and afterthought. I don't really love how the gradient came out on this one as opposed to this one. I don't really know why that happened because I thought I was starting around the same place in the repeat, but that's okay. They are cousins, not twins or even sisters necessarily. I still think it's cute. However, I like lost my steam on this sock because I really properly tried this one on and walked around in it, and I hate the way that it feels on my foot. And I don't know if I'm just like a baby with sensory issues or this is just the wrong yarn type or the wrong sock construction for me. I do feel like I tend to have slightly loose tension, and this yarn isn't super like plush and soft. It's a 2-ply yarn, but I don't know, it's not like super squishy like some sock yarns that I've tried. It does soften up after you block it. And this is Zauberball by Schopenwohl. I think I'm gonna get that right this time. I said something totally wrong in my last podcast episode, sorry. I think I called it Zauberball by Scholen. I don't even know what I said. I feel like I'm still in my roller coaster sock era where I was like, I'll never knit socks. Oh my God, I love knitting socks. Now I'm like, but I kind of hate how they feel on my feet, so maybe I won't actually make them. But if you have any other suggestions, sock knitters, or if you've experienced this too, like, I know I can be kind of a sensitive baby about some sensory things. So if anyone else is like that and you have overcome this with socks, give me your advice, please. Because I just bought into the dream of sock knitting, so I don't want to like give up on it so quickly. So that's the deal with these. I'm just gonna procrastinate on doing this heel until I have no other projects available to work on probably. Okay, my next work in progress is this Jenny jacket. This is the V-neck version by Petite Knit. I showed this in my, I can't remember if I talked about it in my last podcast, but I shared it in my fall knitting plans and inspo video. This is using this is using Knitting for Olive merino and soft silk mohair. The merino is in the color caramel, which, here it is unfortunately apparently discontinued, so that sucks. And the mohair is in brown nougat, which is kind of like a softer brown held together. Sorry, my things are crazy. I'm actually frogging this yarn from a sweater number 14. Now there's dust. A sweater number 14 that I made in 2021, I'm pretty sure. I just don't wear it enough, and it's nice yarn, and I wanted to cast something on, and it was there. So that's how a sweater gets harvested in my household, is you look at me the wrong way and I want to cast something on, I'm gonna tear you apart. I was having a little bit of a hard time frogging it because it has 2 strands of mohair. I only need 1 strand of mohair for this pattern, and I was just kind of like pulling out the second strand of mohair and just cutting it off. But I followed a tip I saw online and I put it in the freezer, and it actually did unravel a little bit more easily. So that's what I'm gonna be doing from now on. My poor boyfriend, every time he opens up the freezer to like get something out, there's just an entire section that is all sweaters right now, because I've been thrifting a lot of cashmere sweaters lately to use the yarn on my knitting machine. So I think the freezer is also a good thing for that. If you're like gonna take apart a sweater that you thrifted, it also helps probably kill anything that might be like tagging along on that sweater. I do also wash the sweaters before I unravel them because dust and things like that tends to trigger my allergies, but I think especially if you're worried about like moths or bed bugs or something. So I ended up having to frog this entire shoulder panel for, I don't know what it is with me and Petite Knit patterns, because they seem so straightforward, and yet somehow I've really only done this one and the round collar version of the original Jenny jacket. I guess I forgot to say these socks are like a kind of bastardized version of her ruffle socks. I didn't do the folded hem and I changed the heel, but that was fine. Those were very straightforward. But for this one, I realized partway down that like my increases weren't matching up to whether an increase should be knit or purl as described in the pattern. So that was a red flag. And then I counted my stitches and it seemed like I was gonna have too many stitches at the end. And then I just like kind of put this one aside for probably at least a week because I didn't want to have to figure out like, you know, kind of doing the backwards math of being like, I should have this many at this point, and if I have this many at this point, then that means I did this wrong here, and like trying to figure out where in the process I actually screwed up so I could frog back as little as possible. Turns out I messed up like almost right away. There's like a section, a couple repeats of this cabling pattern that you do before you start doing increases, and for some reason I was a little overeager and I just jumped into the increases right away, and that screwed up everything basically. So I frogged like almost an entire thing, which that's fine. And it actually wasn't that bad to frog, maybe because this yarn hadn't been like sitting in this for too long, and maybe just because I was comparing it to how bad it was to frog the sweater number 14, this didn't seem too bad to frog. I didn't want to try to, I didn't think I could row down and fix it because you can't really like undo increases because you'll just end up having excess yarn. So that's like really unfortunately you gotta frog the whole thing kind of situation. So yeah, that's silly. What is it about her patterns that makes me do that? I will say that I think kind of a funny, ironic consequence of knitting a lot of your own designs is that it's almost made me worse at reading other people's patterns. Or at least like I feel like I get out of the habit of it, because when you're knitting something from your own design, I feel like you more intuitively understand what is the goal of the section, and the rhythm feels more natural because you're like, I know, I mean, I'll like grade things ahead of time and know like I need to do like an increase every X number of rows. So you still have to keep track of things like that, but especially if you're increasing in pattern, like in ribbing, for instance, I know how I want it to look. So I can just look at my knitting and be like, should this next increase be a knit or a purl? But if I don't intuitively understand yet what the designer is going for from a pattern that I'm knitting, I have to pay much closer attention to like, should this be a knit or a purl? Why? How is it all gonna turn out in the end? Like, you don't necessarily know where each step is leading the same way that you do with your own design, where I'll usually just, you know, for ribbing, I'll just like do the increases or decreases how I like, and then I'll just make a note of it and be like, okay, I'll put that in the pattern. So yeah, that was kind of a funny issue with this, is like, ironically, I feel like maybe worse at following the pattern for this. But we're good now, and I'm still looking forward to finishing this. I do like it. It is kind of one of those good rhythmic knits where you feel like you're always kind of like, oh, let me just do one more repeat, because it is kind of satisfying to get like chunks done as opposed to just like endless rows of stockinette, for instance, or ribbing. So I do find that appealing. I felt that way both times that I knit the sweater number 15 from My Favorite Things Knitwear, which is like just a regular cable repeat. You just always feel like, ooh, let me just get to one more cable repeat. So I make progress on those faster than I expect. I do find this yarn combo plus cabling to be a little bit hard on my hands at times, so I can get a little bit crampy. So that kind of halts some of my progress on this, because it's basically ribbing plus a cable every, I think, 7 rows or something. So that's something to keep in mind. I find this yarn, the Knitting for Olive, Merino, and Mohair, to be not so bad. The original Jenny jacket round neck version that I started, I was using Sunday by Sandnes yarn and one of their mohairs too. I'll see if I can remember it. And that one was a lot tougher on my hands. I find this combo to be softer, but I do still think this will be really cute. This is like just on the border of a brown that I think looks okay on me. I think I look better in cooler colors, but I think that this will be really cute with jeans as just kind of like a big neutral, but it's not too thick because it's a thinner, you know, just 2 strands. So yeah, that's the status of this one. I have set this one aside. This will be kind of like an interim project for me, I think. I set this one aside because I've been working on a sweater that I want to wear to Rhinebeck. So let me show you that one. If you watched my fall knitting plans and inspo video, I talked about wanting rib texture, chocolate brown yarn, and a tie front cardigan. Basically, I was really inspired by this Reformation cardigan called the Antoinette. I suddenly had a thought in my head. I was like, oh my God, I wanna wear a chocolate brown. I wanna wear that chocolate brown ribbed mohair fuzzy cardigan with a little navy satin bow to Rhinebeck. It's my first time going to Rhinebeck. We should talk more about that. But so I've been knitting furiously on this, trying to finish in time. Rhinebeck is in just under 2 weeks, and I started this, I don't know, a week or two ago, but then I ran out of yarn, so I had to wait. So anyway, we're actually making really good progress. So this is where we're at right now. This yarn that I'm using is, first of all, it feels amazing. Honestly, it feels so much better and more luxurious than the Knitting for Olive yarn, which I still think is a pretty nice merino and mohair. So this is using, I have a tiny little ball of the dark brown to show you, but this is a fingering weight, but it's a little bit bordering on sport weight in my opinion. Fingering weight yarn from this dyer called Fall for November, who I think is on hiatus right now, which sucks because I think they make some really beautiful colors. I inherited this from a friend who was destashing, and I had 4 skeins of it, which this is the second one, and I'm almost done with the first sleeve. So it really got a lot of mileage, so I think I'm gonna have at least 1 full skein left over. It's in the color Bark, which is this like really dark chocolate brown with a little bit of black variegation in it too. And it's, like I said, kind of a larger fingering / sport weight, and it's 80% superwash merino, 10% cashmere, 10% nylon. I think that it's meant to be used as a sock yarn. Again, I'm not a sock knitter, so I'm like learning things about this as I go. And then I found this mohair to hold with it at my local yarn store. This is Lana Grossa silk hair in the color Mocha. And it's definitely like a lighter, it looks more yellow on camera than it does in real life. It's kind of a cooler tone brown actually. I had a really hard time finding dark brown mohair yarns, I think partly because the mohair in silk itself seems like it just doesn't hold a ton of super concentrated color like some other fibers do. I've seen that with Surrey alpaca too. Like if you look at dyers who use the same color across multiple different bases, the mohair or the Surrey alpaca looks a lot lighter than the other bases in the same color shade. So I felt like this was pretty good and I wasn't gonna find something that much better. Plus I just really wanted to start. I really wanted to hold mohair with this yarn because I wanted to just get a bigger gauge. First of all, I just finished this top and I felt like I didn't want another like super tiny needles project. And then also, I don't love variegated yarn personally. I think it can look very, very cool, but I tend to go towards more like, this isn't really variegated, I guess this is tonal, but I don't love a ton of differences in shade. So I felt like this mohair being held with it kind of softens that. And now I'm actually really happy. I originally I would have chosen just a purely solid dark brown color. I don't know if you can really see. Yeah, you can see some of the tones in this. I actually think it looks really special and nice. And I'm really happy with how the mohair sort of blends it out so that it's like very subtle shifts. And again, this looks more yellow on camera. Yeah, that shows it more. It is a pretty cool tone brown, chocolatey. I don't know. I'm really, really happy with this color combo and I'm really happy with the fabric. Here's the swatch just to show you. I tried swatching single rib too, but I like 2x2 more. Just to show you that it really does kind of open up a bit after blocking. It doesn't collapse. I mean, it still has a lot of stretch left. You can see it really opens up as opposed to how condensed the ribbing is unblocked. So that's going to be different for every fiber. I think since this is using superwash fingering weight plus mohair, mohair has a lot more drape to it, superwash has more drape to it, it just kind of opens up really nicely. I think that's something you would see with the Knitting for Olive merino and mohair combo too. My only other rib design that I've done is my Prima pullover, and that one is using a worsted weight acrylic wool blend, which is Barocco vintage worsted. And that one really keeps its like very tight rib off the body, even after blocking. So that one's kind of funny. It really looks so teeny tiny. I think this one, when I block it, will have more drape to it, which is what I'm looking for because I want to make this one a tie front cardigan. I want to use actually the same, I have a lot of this double-faced satin ribbon, but I want to use this same ribbon to get this kind of like blue, I don't know. I'm really into navy and black and brown and black and brown and navy. So I don't know, come at me, fashion police. I think those are outdated when people used to say you shouldn't combine those. I think it's really pretty and always love this contrast of satin against a knit texture, especially the fuzziness of this one, I think will just look really pretty. So I'm hoping and thinking, based on the swatch, which was obviously smaller and had like less weight to it even, that this will open up more once I block it, so it will like drape and flow, even if it's not fully buttoned closed. I've been thinking about doing a cardigan with a button band too, and so I'm thinking about maybe offering an option in this pattern to add a picked up double knit button band as well, if you want it to have buttons rather than be a tie front cardigan. I might do like a little, I'll probably do some like prototyping to just make sure that I have the ratio right for the button band, and then offer that as an option for when people test it, if they want to make that version too, and then people can see both versions. I think that'd be really cute. And I might even do that later. I'm thinking that I probably won't add a button band or any finishing to this edge at all before rhinebeck, and I'll just hold it closed with the ribbon, but I think that would look really cute. In terms of shaping and details on this one, I just have a little bit of waist and hip shaping along the edges. Nothing fancy, it's just under the underarm. My Prima pullover has vertical bust dart shaping, but I felt like I just wanted the front of this to be plain rib without any seaming details because I really wanted the fabric. I don't know, it just didn't make sense for this design in my opinion. Although I love vertical bust darts. This top has vertical bust darts too, but I felt like I just wanted the front of this one to be plain rib and a fairly deep, or like not a super deep, but a V-neck that hits about where the arm depth is. And then I also used, I used short row shaping for the upper back, and then I also use it for the cap sleeve. So that's something that I'm really glad I feel like I learned more about for this design. In the past, I've used cap sleeve short row shaping quite a bit in a lot of my different designs because I like doing like a seamless top down set in sleeve basically, and using short rows to shape this sleeve cap lets you kind of like fake the look of a proper set in sleeve which is knitted flat, and then you like shape decreases for a round sleeve cap. I looked into trying to do that, but that seemed like more complicated knitting math than I like to do, and I also hate knitting sleeves bottom up. So using short rows to shape the sleeve cap lets you get the set in sleeve look, but knitting it top down and seamlessly. So love it for that. I have been using it quite a bit, but I always just completely eyeballed it, like very, very free form. And I would just sort of like keep increasing my turns. I don't even know how often, randomly, until I thought it looked about right. I found some really good blog posts that actually explain how to like, I don't know, turn this into like a math formula basically, where you put markers at the top of the armhole, the center of the armhole, and then you put markers where the armhole shaping starts, which you just see like shaped on the body here. And then you do your first turn, you do have like 25% of the stitches are used up in the first turn at like the very start of the top of the sleeve cap, and then you increase by 1 every time. And eventually, based off of, I guess, your knitting and row gauge are usually pretty linked together. By the time that you've made it all the way down to here, you've like rounded this whole sleeve cap. So that is how I used the math to create this sleeve cap, to create this sleeve cap. And I just put that in the pattern for this top too, so I'm gonna see how it works out on all of my testers. I'm really hopeful that that will just make it an easy way for me to use sleeve caps in the future. I'm sure it will. I feel like it should. I tested the Tidy Tee top for Lily Kate Makes a couple years ago, and she uses caps, like short row shaping for the cap sleeve for that too, and that put me onto it. She has amazing finishing details, by the way. Check out her patterns if you haven't before. But that was where I learned it from the first time. But this was helpful for me to sort of like see it from a high level of like, okay, that's how the formula works, rather than just going off of my own body. So last things to say about this. It turns out that the Lana Grossa silk hair is also, I think, being discontinued. At least I got this ball at my local yarn store. When I went to buy more, they were like, oh yeah, we're out and we can't get more. So it might be that both of the yarns I'm using for this are discontinued, which is so annoying, especially when you're designing something, you want to be able to like tell people, here, you can get the yarn that I use too. there are a lot of subs for like sock yarn and mohair. So like, I don't think that that will really be a problem. But that is just frustrating because I love this color and I love them together. And I ended up having to order more online and wait for it to get here, which was part of why I worked on the Jenny jacket in the meantime and the other sock. But yeah, that's frustrating. We want brown yarn. Why is it so hard? I also found out like I was thinking about it, I was talking about it with other people, there are brown sheep. So like, why is it hard to find brown yarn? I don't understand. They should just be undyed brown yarn. But anyway, yeah, so I'm hoping that this will be my rhinebeck sweater. I used a stretchy cast off on the bottom too, which looks kind of bad and flared right now, but I'm hoping once I block it, it will block out very nicely. I hate tubular cast off, so I avoid it at all costs, especially because it seems really fussy with 2x2 rib, but maybe I'll look into that if I don't like this one, or just a regular bind off in pattern. In terms of rhinebeck in general, I'm feeling kind of nervous about it. This is my first time going. I'm driving down from Vermont. I think it's about a 4-hour drive, which hopefully will be really beautiful. We haven't had super dramatic colors here, to be honest, this fall, I think because it was a very wet summer. But I'm hoping the drive south will be nice because leaves peak up here. Like the farther north you go, the earlier they peak. So I'm hoping that on the drive down, there will be more colors happening. I'm staying at a house that is with a bunch of knitters from the Boston area. So I met Lara, the knitting booth, in person last year, along with Toro Knits. She's not coming to Rhinebeck though. They both are like really nice, cool, interesting, smart, funny, talented people. So I'm really excited to hang out with her again in person. And then the rest of the house, I haven't met any of them in person before. I think they've had a couple meetups leading up to the trip. So I'm like the only one coming from out of state, but I think it'll be really fun. I think, yeah, I don't know. Obviously I love knitting so much, so I'm like excited to be in a house full of other knitters talking about knitting, looking at yarn, etc. Anyway, if any of you are going to Rhinebeck, drop a note saying hi. Have you gone before? What is it like? I feel like I don't really know what to expect. I might try to film some things while I'm there to like show anyone else who is curious about it what it's like, but at least I'll talk about the experience when I get back. But yeah, that'll be a fun new thing. So hopefully you'll see me wearing this. Okay, let's talk acquisitions for like a second. So I actually don't have yarn to talk about, but I got a new glass front cabinet to store some of my yarn in. I found it on Facebook Marketplace for $25, which is great. I had wanted to do this ever since I did my like craft room makeover. I wanted some way of storing yarn that you can actually still see it, but it's like protected from dust and moths and whatnot. But I have a hard time finding cute, thrifty stuff in Vermont. I think that people are thrifty in that they like expect to get a lot for their old stuff. Like they're not gonna let it go for cheap. And also, I think there can be a misunderstanding between the difference of something that is old and something that's an antique, because whatever old beat up stuff, you'll see people being like, antique, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, this is a piece of crap. But this $25 can't beat that deal. It's not exactly what I was looking for, but I'm totally happy with this one for what it is, and especially for the price is amazing. So if you're looking for something too, I highly recommend searching like glass bookcase, glass cabinet, dining hutch on Facebook Marketplace. I feel like those things come up pretty often. But it's really nice. I have all of my I filled it up with yarn. I have like lavender and cedar sachets in there. So when you open it up, it just smells so good. And yeah, it's nice to like keep your yarn a little bit protected from the elements, I guess. I don't know, dust mostly. Okay, last topic. I never really talk that much about like media that I'm consuming, but I've been watching a lot of horror movies and also a lot of The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina because it's October and I feel like it just, I don't know. I love a good theme and I feel like it just helps me like get in the vibe of like really appreciating a season that I'm in if I'm also like leaning into that. I mean, I don't know why I'm saying this like it's unique. That's like every girl out there who's ever lit a pumpkin candle in the fall. Like you get what I'm talking about. I'm really enjoying that show. I watched part of it when it first came out and immediately went out and bought a corduroy skirt because her outfit and wardrobe is so cute. There's so many cute sweaters. Makes me wish I had platinum hair and a headband on, but that's been fun and like a little spooky, but not too spooky, but honestly more spooky than I'd expect. And I really like the way that they do magic on that show. Like I like that it feels like if magic were real, that is how magic would work. which I don't know, some people do feel like magic is real, but I feel like it feels more grounded, and like when you look at the ways that human culture interacts with magic, it's like very grounded in the senses and like the earth and rituals. I don't know. I just like it a lot more than like the sort of like point and sparkly things come out of your finger of like the original Sabrina the Teenage Witch. I like that it's like, no, she has to make a deal with the devil, and it's very practical in some ways. Like it makes me think about, you know, back in the day, someone in your village or whatever is like, chew this root and apply a paste and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, what was the difference between magic at that point, like healing magic, and medicine? Like for all intents and purposes, same thing then. And same thing with like, you know, I'm picturing, I was talking to my boyfriend about like farmers' almanacs and sort of this like wisdom that people had about the earth and its patterns in nature that could help you predict what would happen. And like, imagine the difference between someone being like, oh yes, this is how the spring and summer weather will go because of these signals. And also here's what you should do with your life, and be like, you're right about the weather stuff. So like, you probably have magical wisdom. I don't know. Anyway, I'm really enjoying that. I also have like created a whole list of scary movies that I want to watch this October. So far, we've gone through The Witch, which is amazing. Wouldst thou like to live deliciously is like a quote in my household now, which is like my boyfriend asking me if I approve of him ordering cookies for delivery or like dessert or something. So The Witch, The Village, not that scary, but kind of fun. Then I watched Saint Maud, which was great, and The Exorcist and Signs. I don't know why this was an M. Night Shyamalan weekend, but I honestly feel like Signs holds up so much better than I thought it would. Anyway, I have a whole list of movies that I want to watch at some point this October. So if you have any favorite like either horror movies or even kind of like cozy, spooky fall movies, I would love to know any recommendations that you have. And I've also been feeling like a desire to start a sort of, I don't know, spooky or like dark academia novel, like maybe reread The Secret History by Donna Tartt. That's like the classic dark academia. Anyway, it just feels nice to like lean into a seasonal vibe. I actually had kind of a spooky, I mean, it's not really spooky, it has a very easy explanation, but I was on a walk in the woods behind my house, these woods, and I was pretty deep in, like a mile in or something, and I didn't pass anyone. Normally I'll pass people like walking their dogs. It's not a huge forest, but it's a decent sized forest. There's a lot of trails. I didn't pass anyone, and I was like pretty deep into the woods in terms of like where on my loop I was gonna loop back soon. I saw something like white in the distance, and I was like, what is that? Is that like industrial sheeting or a tent or a tarp or something? I rounded the corner and realized it was a wedding arch, which was completely set up with like a rows of empty chairs down this like one particularly beautiful walkway in these woods. And I know that I'm sure it was just someone like planning to get married that afternoon, and their bridal party or whatever went and helped set up the actual ceremony stuff beforehand. But it was so like oddly spooky in my mind. I was like, oh my God, it's like a ghost wedding in these abandoned woods, deep into the woods, following these like windy trails over fallen leaves. I don't know. Added to the fall spooky ambiance. So I love that. Oh, I guess I just want to say one last like pattern news is my Prima pullover is already about halfway through the test knit, and for some reason this is like the speediest test knit group I've ever worked with, and test knitter in particular, who knit the entire thing in like maybe less than a week, which is never my expectation, but it was amazing to get really early feedback, which I'm so excited about, which is that it is so comfortable. So that's my experience in my sweater. I actually faced a lot of criticism and resistance in terms of how I was thinking about dealing with the negative ease and how the negative ease would scale across different sizes. And so I like kind of stuck to my guns about it, but I felt like I did all the research I possibly could to convince myself that this was the right direction, but you never really know until you actually like do the experiment, you know what I mean? In terms of like thinking about your like scientific hypothesis. So did the experiment, and it turns out it actually works. My tester, like unprompted, was like, hey, I have to say, this is so extremely comfortable. I can't believe how stretchy and great this sweater feels to wear. I'm gonna live in this thing. I'm addicted to knitting it. I can't stop. And then she finished the whole thing in like a week. And that person is not in my size. They're like a few sizes larger than mine. And that was just so exciting to hear because I swear it's so comfy. And that top and this top both feel to me like these very, very comfortable, but like fitted, romantic, and a little bit sexy designs. So that was so exciting. The Tessa deadline is November 13th. I feel like it's really on track and I'm looking forward to launching it hopefully in mid-November, barring any like last minute negative feedback. But this testing group has also been really, really helpful about giving early feedback, which is something I value so much in my testers. I think some people are a little shy to say critical things about your pattern, but I wanna know, like, even if it's just that something was confusing, like tell me, because if you're confused, probably other people are confused and I should just find a way to reword it, because the goal is not like for me to be right, the goal is for the pattern to be better. So I'm really grateful for that. Okay, my camera's gonna die. Thank you so much for watching. I love making these. I love knitting. I love talking about knitting. Subscribe if you don't subscribe. I share these pretty often. I'm trying to get back on schedule with sharing them. And I have so many fall, winter, etc. knitting plans that I'm super excited about. So yeah, I can't even remember the things that I wanted all your opinions on, but I do remember the spooky movie list. So please recommend if you have any spooky content for me to consume. Okay, bye. I'll talk to you next time.